Hi, welcome to What the Flick. My name is Christy Lemire. That's Ben, that's Alonzo, that's Matt. For those of you keeping score at home, that means we're all actually here at the same place at the same time. We are not going to play Heads Up today. We have no time. We have no
Too
time.
many movies.
So the first one we're going to talk about is the remake of Seven Samurai called Magnificent Seven. And Ben's going to tell us about it because he's seen it.
This is the story is fairly familiar. A town is under siege by an evil man, and that's a problem with this movie because he's embarrassingly evil.
He's super evil.
He's not Eli Wallach cool evil. He's straight up evil. The town needs help to be able to stay in the town and protect their lives, protect their children, so they go to a sort of a pseudo lawman. What does he describe him? A warrant officer.
Warrant officer.
Warrant officer, played by Denzel Washington, and they ask for his help in fighting the bad men who were taking over their town. And he rounds up 6 friends / acquaintances to defend the town from the evildoer.
Man carries a gun, he tends to use it.
Dan, you dead? Pity. I had just ordered a drink from that man.
Took a job looking for some men to join me.
Is it difficult?
Impossible.
So why does this movie exist?
Yeah, so that's first of all, I get why if you're in a pitch meeting and you're like, hey, what great stories can we redo? I get why you might want to redo this. I mean,
Well,
good. I mean, we're not crying out for it, but that story, as we've just said, it's Seven Samurai, and then when John Sturges remade it as the Magnificent Seven, that storyline, he took parts of things that had been in other movies, but putting it all together like that was the first movie of it for a template that has been copied 1,000 times of rounding up people to go do battle, to go to work, to do something.
Rescue
Sometimes
the innocent.
rescue the innocent. Sometimes it's get them together to do a big con. It's not that different than The Sting.
Also, one of the things that Ebert wrote about is that Seven Samurai may be one of the first times that you see your main hero have some little minor mission to show how awesome he is before
the movie. That might have been the first. Ebert's review of the Magnificent Seven is really well worth reading.
And Seven Samurai. You're talking about
I'm talking about Seven Samurai.
Oh, I thought he said it for Magnificent Seven. He said it for. You're right. He said it for Seven Samurai. That's what.
Which we're going to talk about Seven Samurai and the 1960 Magnificent Seven in a few minutes.
Yes. No, I was just going to say, MGM specifically has been very aggressive about trying to sort of monetize their library, which led to this year's Ben-Hur, a movie I hated less than most people, I think. I
hated it less too.
And now this one.
Which is better than Ben-Hur, I think.
This one is better than Ben-Hur. Yes, I will give you that.
But as we'll talk about when we compare it, it's impossible not to compare it a little bit to the original as we do this first review, but then we'll also do a video where we actually talk about all the movies. The other movies. But there's just, I'm tempted to start with what's wrong.
Go for it.
With this, because among the things that's wrong with it is that it needed Tom Mankiewicz. And, my cousin was.
Oh my God!
No, but
shameless.
But he was. Well, he's dead. But he was one of the. He was among the first script doctors. I mean, Tom really spent the last 20 years of his life, getting, hey Tom, here's $75,000 in 2 days. Fix this scene. Fix this. Make this funnier. And it's kind of funny, but it's not funny enough, and it needed and it's close. It needed a punch up of the witticisms, because sometimes it just seemed like the end of the surfing movie with Damon Wayans. Where Damon Wayans, Bruce Willis, were they in a movie together? Where at the
Last Boy Scout?
Yeah, but it wasn't a surfing movie.
I was going to say, what?
But they're carrying a surfboard at the end of the movie, and one of them goes, "Surf's up, dude!" It had lines like that. We were like, "Oh no, that's not quite right."
Well, how do you have? This is a complaint I frequently have about movies. How do you have some of the most charismatic people on the planet, like Denzel Washington, like Chris Pratt, and just drain the life out of them, and it's not there on the page.
That's what I mean.
It's just
it doesn't pop.
The characterizations, but beyond just the dialogue, like who these guys are, any kind of emotional investment in whether they live or die or make this work. I guess there's a brief glimmer of a aha moment because Antoine Fuqua directed this. You have, which camera's mine, by the way? Is that me?
Yes.
Hi. You have this brief little training day reunion between Antoine Fuqua and Ethan Hawke and Denzel Washington. And that's like, oh, okay, like they have a bit of camaraderie there. The few moments of maybe actual genuine emotion perhaps exist there.
Because Hawke's the only guy who Washington's character is really substantially connected to. Like they're happy to see each other.
Right.
Right, they have a
And
history.
even Hawke's going through stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
You know, I think that the actors bring a lot to this movie that isn't there on the page, and I think and sometimes that actually holds the movie back a little bit. I think Chris Pratt especially brings a level of charm and kind of, you know, just charm and kind of charisma to a role that seems to be written as someone fiercer and meaner than I think Pratt is willing to commit to, right? Like, if you watch that movie again, that character comes off as dangerous. I think it's written as dangerous, and you don't know if you're supposed to trust him.
Yeah, you're right.
But Pratt, like, you look at Pratt, and he kind of inhabits it as this, like, aw shucks, like, look how fun I am, and look how goofy I am. And I think that takes away from it.
Yeah, I think there was something off with that character. I agree. Like it was, or it needed to be a little funnier so that the clever part of it, and then maybe with and like, oh, he's capable. But mostly, you'd think that this guy is supposed to be clever and fun and great with a gun, right? But there was a maliciousness in the beginning that was suggested with him.
Right, and if that's supposed
or a
to
danger at least.
Right, and if that's supposed to be the character from the original film,
He's Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen is not like that.
That's right.
The Steve McQueen character is not written to be as, like, he's this cowboy who's down on his luck.
Right.
And that's kind of it. And this one, that's the least of the problems with this movie. Like, you know, I think that Vincent D'Onofrio does some of the same thing.
God.
Like, D'Onofrio's got this character who's this, like, over-the-top mountain man, bounty hunter type. And he brings a lot more to that character than I think exists. And it's a measure of the skill of these actors that they can kind of fill in the gaps of the script, but you kind of can't get around that.
Did you understand everything D'Onofrio said?
No,
I did not.
That's part of the joke.
I mostly, but it's very methody. It's very like sunk himself into this.
The big bearded guys understand.
Yeah, exactly. He speaks our language, but it's like he's in his own movie in a way because nobody else is going that deeply into this sort of like nutty old west.
Although
sort
he did,
of,
yes.
like he wandered over from The Revenant or something.
Yeah.
But speaking of departures from other movies, like you mentioned, the Peter Sarsgaard villain in this is deepily, frighteningly evil from the first second you see him, and
Peter
obviously
Sarsgaard playing Snidely Whiplash.
Pretty much. I mean, and it adds a
little bit of his Green Lantern performance.
It adds a level of fear to this that you don't see in the original Magnificent Seven. Like Eli Wallach is doing like kind of jokey, kind of charismatic, kind of hilarious villain, kind of charming villain.
And not because of any TCM connection, but I'll take that Wallach. And I like Peter Sarsgaard a lot, but I'll take the Wallach interpretation way. Sarsgaard, that was silly to me. That was not an interesting villain because right off the bat, if he's just shooting people for no reason, right? I mean, he's not even a smart villain.
Well,
like there's no.
He's so
like there was a way for him to win that land and buy off that land cheaply that maybe doesn't involve executing people in the town square.
Yeah, in the previous versions, it's bandits that the Seven have to guard these people against, and in this one, he's a mining company.
He's a robber baron.
He's a robber baron,
Right,
yeah, basically. And which is a neat idea.
Yes,
and
totally.
This is a movie that is filled with a lot of neat ideas that don't quite come off and they don't quite gel. It kind of gets right up to the edge of, oh, this could work, and then doesn't quite see it through.
One of the interesting things about this that wasn't true in the original, of course, because the original was made in 1960, whereas basically all the guys are white. You know, I think there was not quite, like 6.5.
What's Charles Bronson?
Right. What's Yul Brynner for that?
Russian.
Russian, and Charles Bronson, I think, is like Ukraine.
No, originally,
in the movie.
But in the original, Brenner was Cajun.
Cajun.
Yeah.
Right. And
Because that's a Cajun accent.
Totally.
But here we got, you got a Mexican and you got a black guy. And you have
Byung-Hun Lee, who's
Korean and a Native American.
Manuel Garcia-Rulfo and Martin Sensmeier.
Right, so you have a Benetton ad as the Magnificent Seven.
Or really like Fast and Furious. And I think that's kind of what it's, at least the marketing materials make it look like a Fast and Furious on horses. And I don't think it captures that tone correctly.
No.
Nor is it that exciting.
And I think a blown opportunity a little bit because the idea of a warrant officer in the Denzel Washington, and I read an interview with Fuqua who said, I liked the idea of Denzel Washington as a cowboy dressed all in black in 1879. And I'm like, sure, okay, yeah, I like that idea too.
Another idea,
Great idea. So, but then we get a little Denzel Washington backstory at the end, but then it feels very commonplace, very silly, revenge, don't care anymore.
And yes, so late in
the movie.
And there's a moment where you talk about like Denzel being this black warrant officer. There's a moment where early on in the film,
when he walks into town.
He walks into the town and he's got to pull his warrant, like literally pull it out and show, and it does do the barest hint of addressing some social issues in that, like, oh, nobody's ready for a black guy to be a law officer back in the Old West.
Totally.
But then it completely abandons that discussion.
So all these interesting ideas of what, again, it doesn't have to be sort of this treatise on race and ethnicity in late 19th century America, but there's no question that would have informed these guys' experiences, and their experiences would have been interesting. D'Onofrio, who obviously is white, that experience, something about him, like something about what these guys had been through to get to this point.
There's a passing reference to Washington and Hawke's characters having been on opposite sides of the Civil War, which is a line of dialogue and never brought up again.
It's right. It's a conversation for 10 seconds. Yeah. And I just think more of that would have had us, to your point, Christy, it would have had us more invested in whether these guys lived or died, because I think we didn't really care. Like, well, I think 3 or 4 of them will probably live. You think at the beginning of the movie? I wonder which ones it'll be.
Context. Right? We need context.
Right. And I think at the end, the fact that, I won't betray it, but I think the survivors...
Yeah, it's a little subversive.
The survivors, right, that is a little subversive, but none of that got addressed during the movie.
Yeah. So what are our numbers then?
That said, it's a little fun.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's okay.
There's such good actors, and they...
Right, it is a serviceable remake of 2 classic movies.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your number then?
So it's a 6.
I'm also saying 6.
A 6.5.
I'm the high person here, but barely 6.6.
So our average is a 6.3.
It's a magnificent 6.3.
It is.
That's about 65% right now.
Yeah, it's close. It's close.
Go rent the other ones. Bye.